I need to borrow your child. So today I'm going to be using a leaf spring, just like this one, to make a sheep's foot style knife. They have that name because the tip of the knife is very similar to a sheep's foot. I think they look really unique. Now I tried drawing up my own design to make this, but I couldn't quite get all the shapes of the tip right. So it'd be nice to have something to trace around to help get that shape down. And I think I have just the sheep's foot in mind. Hey, look, I just need to trace around your foot, that's all. That's all I need to do. What? Okay, so, yep, just hold your foot right there. Wait, no. Perfect, hold it right there. Uh-huh. Perfect, absolutely perfect. So, it's a little rough. Okay, so I got the design to a point that I like, looking pretty nice. And now for the material that I'm gonna make this knife out of. I got some pieces of leaf spring. I have some options. I gotta say, this piece is looking juicy. So I'm gonna get this end cut off and then break it down to a piece that's a little bit more manageable and preferably not as bent. So right now I'm just grinding, getting ready for the heat treat. And speaking of the heat treat, since this is out of a leaf spring, I don't know exactly what type of steel this is, but it should be similar to a 5160, which is a very common knife making steel. So there's a ton of information out there on how to get a good heat treat on it. So to get an even heat with the forge, I put a tube inside of it, and that makes the heat much more even. It will heat up the knife much softer, and it'll stop all the oxygen from the blower from blowing it straight onto the knife and just oxidizing it a lot. You know what I'm talking about. Something really important when heat treating steel is making the grain size of the steel really small. It's kind of complicated, but it makes it stronger for chemistry reasons. So a way to make the grain size really small is to heat it up to a red heat and then let it slowly cool down at its own rate. And I usually do that 3 times. And then for the actual hardening, it's just heating it up, quenching in oil. And then I did temper it in an oven at 400 degrees, but you don't want to see that. I put the knife in an oven. So that's the heat treat done. I got the knife cleaned up a bit, and now I'm going to start grinding the bevels. And to do that, I found a way to grind bevels that's pretty cool. So I'm using this little piece of steel with a bend on it, and I'm gonna clamp it on to the work rest and go right up against the belt with a very small gap. And so what I can do, this is a test piece that I've been figuring this out with, but what I can do is butt up the bottom of the knife against that little angled part and push the top into the belt. And by moving this back and forth, I can adjust the angle that the bevel is being ground at. And this makes the whole thing super easy since I can just take this push stick and shove the knife into the grinder, and it's going to set the angle for me. So all I have to pay attention to is how deep I'm grinding the bevel. And I'm going to use this mister thing. It just takes compressed air and water. It'll keep the belt and the knife wet to keep the knife cool so it doesn't overheat while grinding. So I'll start grinding that bevel now. Now that all the grinding and hand sanding is done, we can stone wash the blade. Stone washing is pretty cool. I start off with etching the blade just like I do with all the Damascus, but since this knife is just one type of steel, it's all going to be one even color instead of making some pattern like Damascus does. So when the entire blade is darkened up, I put it in a PVC tube. It's nothing special, with some rocks in it. They're especially designed for stone washing, but you can just use rocks. And then I made up a little jig for my grinder to spin the tube around to make a little rock tumbler, and it works really well. You can get like an actual rock tumbler, that's ideal, but it works really well. It gets a great result and is super cheap. Now we're on to making the handle. I'm using this piece of micarta, which is just layers of black and gray, and having all those layers in the handle will be really important later. And while I'm working on the handle, the blade is going to be going back and forth between being stonewashed and not being stonewashed, but just ignore that, that's not important.
I did it again. If I had a nickel for every time I got tape underneath the scale, I'd be really mad at myself for getting tape underneath the scale twice. Why did I do that again? It's not coming out this time. Man, I wish I was good at making knives. That would be very convenient. Okay, we're good now. Let's just pretend that never happened.
After the knife was glued up, I cut off all the extra pin and then started shaping the handle. I started like I always started, by rounding off the back of the handle, make that nice and smooth. And then what I did, I think it was a great idea. I love how this handle came out. I used a small contact wheel and put in a bunch of divots at like a bunch of different angles all around the handle as randomly as I could. And it added some really cool, almost like chipped obsidian type of texturing, and after buffing, it's at a pretty good finish already, and I think it turned out great. And I did do a 45-degree chamfer around the front of the handle and on the butt because I've been doing that on every knife that I make. So then I got the edge in with 200 grit and then did sharpening with 400 grit and 1200 grit. I didn't record the 1200, but you're just gonna have to trust me that I did. But it's pretty sharp and it's finished, and it came out really cool. And like, jokes aside, the profile that I got from the sheep's foot, surprisingly close to the actual profile of the finished blade. So maybe I'll try some other animals. Maybe there are some other animals' feet that will make a cool knife design. Who knows? But that's it. Thanks. Bye.